Serafina Dellinger had always prided herself on her independence. She ran her own boutique, living a life that she had carved out for herself. It wasn't a lavish life by any means, but it was hers. She was happy with it. She loved the quiet mornings spent in her shop, the hum of customers coming in and out, and the satisfaction of being able to create something beautiful from scratch. Her life was simple, grounded in the small, beautiful details that kept her busy and content. But that night changed everything. It wasn't the kind of night Serafina usually found herself in. She didn't frequent bars, didn't go out for extravagant dinners or parties. She preferred a quiet evening, curled up with a book or watching a film she had seen 100 times. But her best friend, Clara, had insisted. "You've been working non-stop, Sarah," she had said, "you deserve a night off. Come with me tonight. You can't say no." And so, with little enthusiasm, Serafina agreed. Clara had already dragged her into a new outfit, a black dress that was simple yet flattering, paired with red heels that made her feel slightly out of place. Still, Serafina went along with it, promising herself that she would enjoy the night, even if it wasn't her usual way of unwinding. The bar Clara had chosen was upscale, filled with trendy people and flashing lights. The loud music and clinking of glasses hit Serafina immediately, almost overwhelming her senses. She stood there, feeling like a fish out of water, as Clara weaved through the crowd, effortlessly chatting with a group of familiar faces. Serafina, though used to being the quiet one, preferred to find a corner to herself, nursing a drink and watching the crowd. But that night, fate had other plans. It was when the door to the bar opened that her world shifted. The man who walked in wasn't like anyone else in the room. While everyone else was caught up in the chaos of the night, he seemed unaffected. His tall, commanding figure filled the room with an undeniable presence. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of wealth and power, and yet, it wasn't just his appearance that drew her in, it was the way he moved, with a quiet confidence that made him seem almost out of place among the flashy crowd. Serafina couldn't help herself. Her gaze followed him as he made his way across the room, his piercing eyes scanning the crowd before they landed on her. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow, and she felt the air between them thicken. She quickly looked away, feeling a rush of heat on her cheeks. It was ridiculous, he was just another man in a suit. But there was something in the way he looked at her that left her breathless. The man made his way to the bar, but Serafina didn't think much of it. People like him didn't pay attention to someone like her. She wasn't the type to go after the rich, the powerful. Her life had been one of simple pleasures and modest goals. She didn't belong in the world he moved in. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't until a few minutes later that he came to her. She hadn't expected it. He walked over to her with a purposeful stride, his gaze still fixed on her, and when he reached her, he smiled. It wasn't a flashy smile, not the kind that people gave when they were trying to impress. It was genuine, warm, but with an edge that made her curious. "Mind if I join you?" His voice was low, rich, and surprisingly inviting. Serafina blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his directness. She opened her mouth to respond but found herself hesitating. What was it about this man that made her feel so unnerved? She wasn't used to being approached like this, especially not in a place like this. But there was something about him, something in the way he looked at her, like he was seeing past her outward appearance into something deeper. She smiled, trying to mask her unease. "Sure," she said, gesturing to the seat beside her. "It's a free country." He chuckled softly and sat down beside her. "I don't usually find myself here," he said, his eyes scanning the room, his expression thoughtful. But tonight, it felt right. The way he said it made Serafina wonder if there was more to this man than the surface. There was something detached about him, as though he were always observing the world from a distance, never quite getting involved. He didn't seem like the kind of person who lived for the next big deal or the next social event. And that intrigued her. "I'm Serafina," she said after a moment of silence, offering him a polite smile. "And you are?" "Roman Hawk," he replied, his voice smooth and confident. "You seem a bit out of place here." "Not really your scene, is it?" She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You could say that. I'm more of a quiet night-in kind of person." "But Clara, my best friend, insisted. She thought I needed a break." Roman's eyes softened, a hint of understanding in his expression. "Sometimes we all need to be pulled out of our comfort zones." "Yeah, well, tonight was definitely that." She laughed, a bit nervously, before taking a sip of her drink. "So, what brings you here, Roman?" His lips curled into a half-smile. "Same reason as you, I suppose," he said. "A break from my own life. A chance to relax, but now that I've found you, I'm not sure I want to go back." Serafina froze, the words hitting her more than she expected. There was something in his gaze, something serious and intent, that made her heart race. She couldn't quite explain it. They were just two strangers talking, after all. And yet, the way he looked at her made everything around them fade away. "Relax, I'm not going to bite," he added with a teasing glint in his eye, his voice playful but with a depth to it that made her feel as if he were revealing a piece of himself. She laughed again, trying to ease the tension that had suddenly crept into the conversation. But inside, her mind was spinning. What was it about this man? There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled her in, even when she wasn't sure if she should let herself be pulled. The conversation flowed easily from there. Roman was charming in a way that wasn't overwhelming, his questions about her life thoughtful and genuine. He didn't push her to reveal too much, but she found herself talking more than she usually would with a stranger. The way he listened made her feel heard in a way that was rare for her. Time seemed to fly by, and when the evening came to a close, Roman stood up, a quiet elegance in his movements. "I know you didn't come here for anything serious, Serafina, but I'd like to see you again. Maybe not here, but somewhere quieter. I'm sure you'd enjoy it more." Her heart skipped a beat, but she couldn't bring herself to say no. "I'm not sure what you mean by serious," she said, the words escaping before she could stop herself. "But I'll take you up on that offer. A quieter place does sound appealing." Roman smiled, his eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "I'll call you." And with that, he left, leaving Serafina standing there, trying to make sense of the whirlwind she had just experienced. She wasn't sure what had just happened, or what it meant. But one thing was certain, she had just met a man who had somehow, in a matter of hours, shifted something deep inside her. And for the first time in a long time, she found herself wondering what would come next. The days following her encounter with Roman were a whirlwind of emotions for Serafina. She had tried to push the memory of him to the back of her mind, convincing herself that it was just a fleeting connection, a spark that would eventually fade. But every time she walked through her boutique or sat alone in the quiet of her apartment, his face seemed to pop up in her thoughts, uninvited but impossible to ignore. She had been nervous, even scared, about the chemistry they'd shared. It had been too intense, too fast, and it had left her questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't the type to fall for someone so quickly, let alone a man who seemed like he lived in a completely different world, a world of wealth, power, and endless possibilities. Serafina had spent her life avoiding men like Roman, telling herself that love wasn't worth the risk. Her heart had been guarded for so long, and now, for the first time in years, it felt like it was wide open. Roman had given her his number before he left, and though she had tried to tell herself she wouldn't call, her curiosity had gotten the better of her. She found herself staring at his name on her phone screen more times than she cared to admit, her fingers itching to press the call button, even though she knew it would only complicate things. She had always been someone who preferred the safety of her small world, her boutique, her routine, her quiet life, but something about Roman made her want to step outside of that world, to take a chance, to see what might lie beyond the comfort of what she knew. It was 3 days later when she received a message from him. She had been preparing for a busy day at her boutique, making sure everything was in order when her phone buzzed with a notification. "Serafina, I hope you haven't forgotten about me. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'd love to see you again. I know we didn't have much time the other night, but I think there's more we should explore." Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message. She had tried to convince herself that he would move on, that their night together would remain just that, one night. But here he was, reaching out, telling her that he wanted more. She stared at his words for a long time, torn between the part of her that was afraid of what this could become and the part of her that felt the pull, the undeniable desire to see him again. "I'd like that," she replied, her fingers moving faster than her thoughts. "When and where?" A few moments later, he sent a reply. "How about 7 p.m. tonight? I'll send a car for you. Wear something comfortable, but make sure you feel yourself. Trust me, you'll enjoy it." The confidence in his words made her stomach flutter. She didn't know what he had planned, but a part of her felt an undeniable thrill at the idea of letting go of control for just a few hours. She didn't need to know everything. She just needed to feel something real, something different. When the car arrived to pick her up, she tried not to overthink it. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to figure out where they were going or what the night would bring. She simply allowed herself to relax and let Roman take the lead. As they drove through the city, the lights blurred past her window, creating a kind of dreamlike atmosphere. She was silent, lost in her own thoughts, her eyes occasionally glancing at Roman as he sat beside her, his expression calm and unreadable. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled her in even when he wasn't speaking. The air between them was thick with anticipation, but neither of them spoke about it. They didn't need to. The silence spoke volumes. The car eventually stopped outside a beautiful, elegant building that Serafina had never noticed before. It wasn't a restaurant or a nightclub, it was a private residence, one that seemed to exude an air of mystery. Roman looked over at her with a faint smile. "I hope you're ready for this," he said softly. She nodded, not entirely sure what he meant but knowing that, for the first time in a long while, she was letting go of the need for certainty. Whatever this was, it was something new, something exciting, and she was willing to embrace it. They entered the building, and Roman led her up a set of grand stairs into a penthouse that left Serafina breathless. The space was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, plush furniture that looked as if it belonged in a magazine, and art that filled the walls with color and life. It was warm, inviting, and yet, there was something about it that felt almost surreal. "I thought we'd get away from the noise of the world for a while," Roman said, his voice low, guiding her further into the apartment. "No distractions. Just you and me." Serafina could feel her pulse quicken. She had always prided herself on being grounded, on maintaining control over her life. But here, with Roman, all of that seemed to melt away. The world around her was different, more lavish, more indulgent, but in this space, she felt like she could be herself, unguarded. They settled onto the couch, Roman sitting beside her, their shoulders brushing as they both stared out the window, the city light sparkling beneath them. "You know, I never thought I'd end up here," Roman said after a long silence, his voice contemplative. "I've built a life that's different from most people's. A life that doesn't allow for much softness. But when I'm with you, it feels like I can finally breathe." Serafina turned to him, her heart beating faster at his words. "You seem so at ease. But I'm still trying to figure out what this is. What we are." Roman met her gaze, his eyes softening. "I get it. But I want you to know, Serafina, that I'm not looking for just a fling. I'm not looking for something temporary. I want something real. Something meaningful." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. She could feel the sincerity in his voice, the honesty in his eyes. She had never heard a man speak to her like this, no games, no pretenses, just a raw, unfiltered desire for something more. "I'm not sure what I'm ready for," Serafina admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I know I don't want to walk away from this. Roman reached for her hand, his touch gentle, but his grip firm. Then don't. Stay. Stay with me, Serafina. In that moment, something inside Serafina shifted. She didn't know where this would lead, and she didn't need to. All she knew was that, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to take a step forward into the unknown. Their faces were inches apart, their breaths mingling in the silence. Roman leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was soft at first, as if testing the waters. But then it deepened, and the world around them faded. In that kiss, Serafina felt everything, the weight of her fears, her uncertainties, and her desire for something real, something beyond the ordinary. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless, their foreheads resting against each other as they shared the quiet moment. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Their connection had already been established, and it was more powerful than either of them had expected. "Let's take this slow," Serafina whispered, her hand resting on his chest. "I need to figure this out. But I don't want to walk away either." Roman smiled, his eyes warm and understanding. "We'll take it at your pace. I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, Serafina realized that whatever happened next, she wasn't alone. They had crossed a line that neither of them could uncross, but for the first time, she didn't want to. Whatever this was, she was ready to explore it, to see where it would take them. With Roman by her side, she was ready to discover a world she never thought she would find herself in, a world that, for once, didn't feel so out of reach. Serafina woke up the next morning feeling a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. The events of the previous night played in her mind over and over, Roman's words, his touch, the kiss that had left her breathless. It all felt like a dream, a world she hadn't even known she could belong to. But as she sat up in her bed, looking out the window at the early morning sunlight filtering through the curtains, she realized that this wasn't a dream. It was real, and she had to face the consequences of what had just begun. Her thoughts swirled as she tried to put everything in perspective. She had never imagined herself in a situation like this. Roman Hawk was a man who had everything, wealth, power, success, and yet he had come to her, of all people, and asked for something real. It was a far cry from the quiet life she had always known, the life she had built on her own terms. She couldn't help but wonder, what did he really want from her? Was this just a fleeting attraction, a moment of excitement in a life full of luxury and high expectations? Or was he serious about what he had said? Was there really something real between them, something worth exploring? The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. And with each new question, her heart seemed to grow heavier with uncertainty. She couldn't afford to ignore these feelings. Not when Roman had been so open with her. Not when she had felt something deeper than just a casual fling. But could they make it work? Could someone like her, someone who had built her life on independence and simplicity, really step into a world so different from her own? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Roman. "Good morning, Serafina. I hope you slept well. I've been thinking about last night, and I'd love to see you again. How about lunch today? I'll make sure it's somewhere peaceful, where we can talk more. Let me know what works for you." Serafina stared at the message for a moment. It was a simple invitation, but the words carried a weight. He wanted to talk, to continue what they had started. She felt a flutter in her chest. The thought of seeing him again, of hearing his voice, of being close to him again, stirred something inside her, a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would he want from her this time? She typed a quick reply, her fingers trembling slightly as she hit send. "I'd love that. How about 1 p.m. at the cafe near my shop? It's quiet there. Perfect for a conversation." Roman's response came almost immediately. "Perfect. I'll be there. I can't wait to see you again, Serafina." When Serafina arrived at the cafe that afternoon, she felt a mixture of anticipation and nerves. The small café, with its cozy atmosphere and soft lighting, felt like a world away from the opulence of Roman's penthouse, a welcome reprieve from the uncertainties she had been grappling with. She walked in and spotted him immediately. He was seated at a corner table, looking out the window. As usual, he was impeccably dressed, but there was something different about the way he carried himself today. His usual confidence was there, but his eyes seemed softer, almost vulnerable. "Roman," she greeted, a smile tugging at her lips as she walked over to the table. "It's good to see you again." He stood up immediately, his expression warming as he looked at her. "Serafina, you look even more beautiful than last night." She blushed, unsure of how to respond. It was a compliment that felt genuine, and it stirred something deep within her, a feeling she hadn't been prepared for. "Thank you. You look, well, you always look good." Roman chuckled, pulling out the chair for her. "I hope you're not still thinking about last night. I didn't want to overwhelm you, but I needed to be honest about how I felt." Serafina took her seat, the weight of his words settling in. She had been trying to make sense of everything that had happened, but hearing him admit that he needed to be honest made her feel like she was on the verge of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. "I've been thinking about it too," she said quietly, her voice betraying her uncertainty. "It's just a lot to process, Roman." She stopped herself, not sure how to finish the sentence. Roman leaned in slightly, his eyes focused on her, soft but intense. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. I don't expect you to jump into anything, but I don't want you to think that this is just a fleeting thing. I'm not like that." Serafina looked at him, her chest tightening. "I know. It's just that, you live in such a different world. I don't know if I belong in it." Roman's gaze softened further, and he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You belong wherever you want to belong, Serafina. I didn't ask you here to complicate your life. I asked because I want you to know that I'm serious about this. About us." Her breath caught in her throat. Serious? About them? She hadn't expected him to be so direct, so vulnerable. There was no pretense in his words. No hidden agenda. Just the raw honesty of a man who was laying everything on the table, willing to be open and vulnerable with her. "I don't know what this is, Roman," Serafina said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what you want from me." Roman's expression softened, his thumb gently brushing over her hand. "I want you, Serafina. Not just for the night, not just as a fleeting attraction. I want you in my life, however that might look. I can't promise you that it'll be easy, but I can promise you that I'm not going to back away from this. I'm not going anywhere." Her heart pounded in her chest as the weight of his words sank in. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't offering her something temporary. He was offering her his heart, his time, his commitment. But the question was she ready for that? "I've never had anything like this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been in a relationship where it wasn't just about the simple things, where I wasn't in control." Roman nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I get it. I understand that you're scared, that you don't know if this is something you can trust. But I'm not asking you to give up control. I'm just asking you to trust me. To let me show you that I can be the man you need." Serafina felt the tears well up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of the emotions she was trying to hold back. She had never been the type to let her guard down, to give someone the power to break her heart. But Roman had a way of making her feel like she could trust him, even when everything inside her told her to be cautious. "I don't know what the future holds," Serafina whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I can't walk away from this." Roman smiled, his eyes filled with relief. "That's all I'm asking for, Serafina. One step at a time. We'll figure this out together." The rest of the lunch passed in a blur, the two of them talking about everything and nothing, enjoying the peace that came with simply being in each other's presence. For the first time in a long while, Serafina felt like she could breathe again, like maybe, just maybe, she could let herself take a chance on something she didn't completely understand. When they left the cafe, Roman didn't let go of her hand. He walked her to her car, his fingers gently brushing against hers. The connection between them was undeniable, and as he leaned in to kiss her goodbye, Serafina felt her heart race again. The kiss was soft at first, a gentle reminder of the chemistry that had drawn them together, but as the kiss deepened, everything else seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, standing in the middle of the bustling city, and for the first time, Serafina didn't feel afraid. She didn't feel like she needed to control everything. Roman pulled away first, his eyes dark with something deeper than desire. "I'll call you tonight," he said, his voice low. "And I'll be here, Serafina. I won't go anywhere." As he walked away, Serafina stood there, her hand still tingling from his touch. She didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time, she felt like she was ready to find out. The days following their lunch felt like a blur of conflicting emotions for Serafina. She couldn't stop thinking about Roman, about his words, the way he looked at her, and the promises he had made. She found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about herself and the life she had built. She had always been the type to take control, to carve out her own path, but with Roman, things felt different. It was as if she had stepped into a world that wasn't hers, a world of luxury and expectation, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But then, there was the way he made her feel. Roman didn't look at her like a project, like someone he could mold or change. He didn't try to convince her to step into his world. Instead, he simply offered her his world, and in return, he wanted her to trust him, to take a chance on something real. She hadn't expected it, and it terrified her in a way she wasn't sure how to handle. Despite the fear, part of her knew she couldn't just walk away. There was something undeniable between them, something that had ignited in that one night and had only grown stronger with each passing conversation. When they were together, everything felt effortless, like they were simply two people who had found something worth fighting for. But when they weren't together, doubts crept into her mind. She kept telling herself that she didn't belong in Roman's world, that she wasn't cut out for the kind of life he led. But every time she looked at him, every time he spoke to her with such earnestness, it felt as if those doubts were slowly being washed away. It was a Friday evening when she received a text from Roman, the kind of message that made her heart race and her stomach flutter. "I've been thinking about you all week. I'd love to see you tonight. I'm having dinner at a quiet place downtown. Would you join me?" Serafina stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She wanted to see him. She wanted to feel that pull between them again, the electricity that sparked whenever they were close. But there was also a voice in the back of her mind telling her that this was dangerous, that she was getting in too deep. Yet, despite the warning bells ringing in her head, she couldn't resist. She replied with a simple, "I'll be there." The evening seemed to stretch on as she prepared for their dinner. She carefully chose an outfit, something simple but elegant, wanting to make a good impression without overdoing it. She didn't want to feel like she had to compete with his world, she just wanted to be herself. But as she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. She wasn't used to dressing up for anyone, least of all a billionaire like Roman. When she arrived at the restaurant, a small, elegant place tucked away on a quiet street, she was immediately struck by its charm. It was nothing like the extravagant, high-end places she had seen Roman frequent. This place felt intimate, personal, a reflection of Roman's taste in a way that she hadn't expected. As soon as she walked in, she spotted him sitting at a corner table, looking relaxed but still commanding in the way only he could. His eyes met hers across the room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. He stood as she approached, his smile warm and welcoming. "Serafina," he said, his voice low, almost like a secret. "You look even more beautiful than I remember." Her cheeks flushed at the compliment, but she smiled back. "Thank you. You look great, too." Roman guided her to the table, pulling out her chair in a gesture that seemed old-fashioned but endearing. There was something about the way he treated her, gentle but confident, that made her feel both at ease and overwhelmed. She took her seat, looking around the dimly lit restaurant. It was small, with soft music playing in the background, and the low murmur of conversations around them only added to the intimacy of the space. It felt like a world away from the crowded bars and loud parties that Roman typically attended. As they settled into their meal, the conversation flowed easily. Roman spoke of his childhood, how he had grown up with a single mother who had worked tirelessly to provide for him and his siblings. Serafina listened, captivated by the vulnerability he showed in sharing such personal details. She had never expected someone like Roman to have such a grounded perspective, to come from a place so different from the one he now occupied. "I never really understood what it meant to appreciate the small things," Roman admitted, his tone reflective. "Growing up, we didn't have much, but my mother made sure we knew what mattered. She always said that you don't need money to be rich. You need love, connection, and the ability to be kind. She taught me that." Serafina found herself moved by his words. It was the kind of honesty she hadn't expected from someone so accustomed to the world of luxury. It made her realize that, despite the wealth and the power he wielded, Roman wasn't just a product of that world. He was still the man his mother had raised, someone who valued the deeper connections in life. "Your mother sounds like an incredible woman," Serafina said softly. Roman's eyes softened at the mention of her. "She was. She taught me everything I know. And when I look at what I have now, I can't help but feel a sense of responsibility to make sure I honor her legacy. To do good with what I've been given." The conversation shifted from personal to more light-hearted topics. They talked about their favorite movies, books, and music, the kind of casual conversation that made Serafina feel like they had known each other for years. But as the evening wore on, the subject of their relationship inevitably came up. Roman leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "Serafina, I know this is all happening quickly," he began, his voice low but firm. "But I want you to know that I'm serious about this. About us. I don't want you to think that this is just a fling, or that I'm only interested in something short-term. I've never felt this way about anyone before." Serafina's heart raced. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten with emotion. She had known, deep down, that he wasn't just looking for a casual affair, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel more real. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm not sure what to think yet," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I've never been in a situation like this before. It's all overwhelming. But I'm willing to take it one step at a time." Roman nodded, his gaze intense but understanding. "That's all I'm asking for. One step at a time. We don't need to rush this, Serafina. I just want to see where it goes." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling between them. Serafina could feel the sincerity of Roman's words in her bones, but she also knew she had to be cautious. She had to protect her heart, even as it seemed to fall deeper under his spell. As the night drew to a close, Roman stood and offered her his hand, helping her up from the table. He smiled at her, his eyes filled with something that made her pulse quicken. "I'm glad we could talk," he said softly. "I know it's not easy, but I hope this is just the beginning, Serafina." Serafina smiled back, her heart still racing from the intensity of the night. "I hope so too, Roman." As they left the restaurant and stepped into the cool night air, Roman turned to her and took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. The walk to the car felt slow, as if the world around them had faded into the background. All that mattered was this moment, this connection between them that seemed to be growing with each passing second. Roman stopped before the car, his gaze locking onto hers. "I'll see you again soon, Serafina. I'm not going anywhere. And I hope you're not either." Serafina's heart fluttered in her chest as she met his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere either." Roman's lips curved into a smile, and as he leaned in to kiss her, Serafina closed her eyes, letting herself melt into the kiss. It was slow, lingering, and full of promise, a promise she wasn't sure she was ready to make, but one she felt deep in her heart nonetheless. As they parted, Serafina couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in a long time, she was exactly where she needed to be. And she was ready to see where this journey would take them. The next few days passed in a blur, with Serafina finding herself caught between the lingering feelings of excitement from her time with Roman and the overwhelming weight of her own doubts. Every time she thought about him, a part of her felt an inexplicable pull, but another part, the more cautious side of her, screamed at her to slow down, to protect herself from getting too attached too quickly. She wasn't sure how to balance the growing connection between them with the reality of her life, the life she had worked so hard to build. Yet, despite the turmoil inside, she couldn't deny that something about Roman felt different. He wasn't like the other men she had encountered. Where others had been shallow or only interested in the surface-level aspects of her life, Roman seemed genuinely interested in her, her thoughts, her dreams, her fears. He had shared so much with her already, letting her into a world she had never known, and each conversation left her wanting more. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, while walking to work, while picking out fabrics for her store, while drinking coffee alone in the mornings. He had gotten under her skin in a way she hadn't expected, and now, she couldn't seem to escape the pull of his presence. Roman had been relentless in his pursuit of her, texting and calling, making sure they stayed in touch. They met for coffee, dinner, even casual walks around the city, and each time, the connection between them grew stronger. He never pressured her, never rushed her into anything she wasn't ready for. His patience and understanding were disarming, and for the first time in a long while, Serafina found herself relaxing, letting go of the walls she had built around her heart. But she couldn't escape the feeling that something big was coming, something she wasn't sure she was prepared for. Roman had made it clear that he wanted more, that he wasn't just looking for a casual fling. He had told her, in no uncertain terms, that he saw something real between them. And yet, despite the chemistry they shared, despite the undeniable attraction, Serafina couldn't bring herself to fully believe in it. She had seen so many people who seemed perfect for each other fall apart. She had seen the glitzy, glamorous lives of the rich and powerful turn into something empty, something unrecognizable. She didn't want that for herself. She didn't want to get caught up in a world she didn't understand. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she finally received the text that changed everything. She had been at the boutique, arranging some new shipments, when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She had learned not to ignore Roman's messages, but this one was different. It was short, direct, and filled with an urgency that sent a shiver down her spine. "Serafina, I need to see you. Meet me at my place at 7 p.m. It's important." Her heart raced as she read the message. She had learned by now that Roman was rarely this serious in his texts. The casual, easygoing tone he usually carried was gone, replaced with something else, something more serious, more urgent. She couldn't help but wonder what had changed. What did he want to talk about? As the hours dragged on, Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something that might change everything. She spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to Roman. She couldn't help but replay their conversations in her head, trying to figure out what he wanted to say to her. When 7 p.m. finally rolled around, Serafina found herself standing outside Roman's penthouse, her heart in her throat. She had never been nervous to see him before. They had always been so at ease with each other. But tonight, something felt different. She wasn't sure if it was the tension in the air or the uncertainty that had settled in her chest, but she couldn't deny that she was apprehensive. Roman opened the door as soon as she knocked, his face serious but his eyes warm, as always. He stepped aside to let her in, and Serafina felt a strange sense of familiarity as she entered the space she had already visited several times. But tonight, everything felt heavier. The weight of the conversation she knew was coming was pressing on her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to hear something that would change the course of their relationship. Roman led her into the living room, where the soft glow of the city lights filtered through the windows. He was dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans, his usual polished appearance softened, as if he were trying to show her a side of himself that wasn't as guarded. Serafina couldn't help but admire how effortlessly attractive he was, even in something so casual. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in despite all her reservations. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice soft but with an underlying seriousness that made her heart race. "I know this is sudden, but I need to talk to you about something important." Serafina sat down on the couch, trying to steady her breathing. "Of course," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on, Roman?" He sat down beside her, his posture tense, his hands resting on his lap. For a moment, he was silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, as if gathering his thoughts. Serafina's anxiety grew with each passing second. She wanted to reach out to him, to ask what was wrong, but she stayed still, afraid of what he might say next. Finally, Roman looked up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Serafina. About everything we've shared over the past few weeks. And I can't ignore it any longer. I'm not just here for a fling. I'm not here for a temporary distraction. I want something real with you." Her heart skipped a beat at his words, and her mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was saying. They had shared so much, and yet, hearing him admit that he wanted more felt like a bombshell. She had always been afraid of getting hurt, of opening her heart to someone only to have them walk away. But here Roman was, laying everything on the line, telling her that he was in this for the long haul. "I don't know what that means for us," Roman continued, his voice strained. "But I do know that I want to take this further. I can't keep pretending that this is just a casual thing. I care about you, Serafina. And I think you feel the same way." Serafina's breath caught in her throat. She had known it, deep down, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so much more real. She had been afraid, so afraid of giving her heart away, but now, in this moment, she realized that she couldn't keep running from it. She had already given him pieces of herself, and every time they were together, she gave him more. "I do feel the same," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I've been scared, Roman. Scared of what this means. But I can't ignore what's between us. I don't want to." Roman's face softened, and he reached out to take her hand in his fingers warm against her skin. "Then let's take this together," he said, his voice filled with hope. "No more running, no more doubting. We can figure this out, Serafina. I don't know where it will lead, but I want to find out with you." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, Serafina felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been so afraid of letting go, of giving someone else the power to hurt her. But in Roman's eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity. And in his touch, she felt a warmth that promised to protect her, no matter what the future held. She nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Okay. Let's do this." Roman smiled back, his eyes full of affection and relief. "I promise you, Serafina, I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, as she sat beside him, their hands intertwined, Serafina realized that she was ready to let go of the fear that had held her back for so long. She was ready to step into a new chapter of her life, one where love wasn't something to be feared, but something to be embraced. Together, they would figure it out. Together, they would face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, Serafina knew that she wasn't alone. The following days felt like a mix of exhilaration and fear for Serafina. The conversation with Roman had opened something inside her, something that had been dormant for so long. His words, his sincerity, his touch, it was all so new, so different from what she had been used to. She had always been cautious, careful not to let anyone get too close, but now she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. Was she really ready for this? Could she truly let herself fall for someone like Roman? They had agreed to take things slow, no expectations, no pressure. And while the slow pace initially gave Serafina some comfort, the truth was that the more time they spent together, the more the line between casual and serious began to blur. She found herself looking forward to their time together, not just because of the physical attraction, but because of the way he made her feel. When they were together, she didn't feel like she had to pretend. She could be herself, and that was something she hadn't realized she was missing until now. Roman had been patient, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give, and that patience had made Serafina feel like she was in control. Still, the uncertainty lingered. What did this mean for her future? What was she supposed to do with this new, unfamiliar feeling that was slowly taking root in her heart? It was a Sunday afternoon when Roman invited her over for dinner. She had spent the entire day working on new designs for her boutique, trying to push aside the lingering thoughts of him, but she couldn't seem to focus. She hadn't seen Roman in 2 days, and the absence of his presence made her realize just how much she had come to depend on him. She wasn't sure how it had happened. It had all started so casually, a simple night out, but now, it seemed as though he was becoming an integral part of her life in a way she hadn't expected. When the doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., Serafina's heart raced in anticipation. She opened the door to find Roman standing there, a bottle of wine in his hand and a soft smile on his face. The sight of him never failed to make her breath catch in her throat. He had a way of making everything feel more intense, more real, even when he wasn't saying a word. "Good evening, Serafina," he said, his voice warm and familiar, but there was something different about him tonight. He seemed more serious, more contemplative than usual. "I thought we could have a quiet night in. Just the two of us." Serafina smiled, stepping aside to let him in. "That sounds perfect." He handed her the wine, his fingers brushing against hers for a brief moment, and they shared a quiet smile. It was simple, just a moment, but it was full of unspoken understanding. As Roman set the wine down on the kitchen counter, he turned to her. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "About everything. About us." Serafina's heart skipped a beat. His tone was different now, more serious than usual. He had always been direct with her, but tonight there was an edge to his words that made her stomach tighten. She wiped her hands on the dish towel, her mind racing. "What about us?" Roman took a step closer, his expression soft but filled with intent. "I don't want you to think that I'm rushing you, Serafina. I know this has all happened quickly, but what we have, it feels like something that could be real, something worth exploring further." Her breath caught in her throat. She had known this was coming, the moment when everything would become more serious. She had felt it in the way he looked at her, in the way he had held her close every time they were together. There was something undeniable between them, something that neither of them could ignore. But the weight of his words hit her in a way she hadn't expected. "Roman," she didn't know what to say. Her feelings for him had been building, growing, but she still wasn't sure if she was ready for the leap he was asking her to make. The life he led, so different from hers, felt like an obstacle she wasn't sure how to overcome. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I just need to know where we stand. Because I know where I stand, Serafina. I care about you. More than I expected, more than I've allowed myself to care about anyone in a long time." Serafina felt the weight of his words settle deep in her chest. Her pulse quickened as she struggled to find the right words. "I don't know what to say. I've never been in a situation like this before. It's all, so much. And I don't know if I'm ready for what you're offering. I don't know if I'm ready to give up the life I've built for this, whatever this is." Roman reached out, his hand gently resting on hers. "You don't have to give up anything, Serafina. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm not asking you to leave behind your life. I just want to be a part of it. I want us to be part of each other's lives." She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. There was no doubt in his eyes, no hesitation, and it made her heart swell with a strange mix of emotion. The vulnerability in his eyes was unmistakable. He wasn't just offering her a relationship, he was offering her a future that she hadn't even begun to imagine until now. "I don't know how to balance this," she admitted, her voice soft. "I've worked so hard for what I have. And now I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Roman's grip on her hand tightened, but not in a way that felt possessive. It was as though he was trying to anchor her, trying to reassure her that she didn't have to navigate this alone. "I don't expect you to have all the answers, Serafina. I don't even have all the answers. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, they stood there, their hands intertwined, the quiet between them thick with unspoken understanding. Serafina's mind raced, but her heart knew what it wanted. She couldn't ignore the feelings that had been building inside her, the way Roman made her feel safe, cherished, and wanted in a way she hadn't realized she needed. She nodded slowly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know what this means yet, but I'm willing to find out." Roman smiled, his eyes lighting up as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, Serafina allowed herself to sink into the comfort of his embrace. It wasn't about making grand promises. It was about something simpler, something more real. It was about trusting that the two of them, together, could figure this out. They didn't need to have all the answers right away. They just needed to take the first step. "I'm glad you're willing to take this chance," Roman said softly into her hair, his voice filled with sincerity. "Because I promise you, Serafina, I'm not going anywhere." As she stood there in his arms, the noise of the world seemed to fade away. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't need to. All she needed to do was trust in the connection they had, in the feeling that, for better or for worse, this was something worth pursuing. They shared a quiet dinner that night, eating, laughing, and talking about everything and nothing at all. The walls between them had come down, and what was left was simple, just two people, figuring it out as they went. Serafina didn't have all the answers, but in Roman's arms, she didn't feel like she had to. She felt safe, cherished, and, for the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't alone in this world. Later that night, as they stood at the door to say goodbye, Roman leaned in to kiss her. The kiss was gentle at first, soft, like the quiet promise of something more. But then, as they deepened the kiss, it became clear that the connection between them was anything but simple. It was something that couldn't be denied, something that neither of them could walk away from. When they finally parted, Roman rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "I'll see you soon, Serafina," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, her heart full. "I'll be here," she whispered back. "I'm not going anywhere either." And with that, they both knew that they were no longer just two people, caught up in a whirlwind of feelings. They were a team, ready to face whatever came next, together. The weeks following that quiet evening together were a blur for Serafina. The connection between her and Roman had only deepened, and the more they spent time together, the more her doubts began to fade. Each moment, whether spent in his penthouse or at a quiet cafe, seemed to confirm that what they had was real. Yet despite all the sweetness and tenderness that filled their time together, there was an underlying tension she couldn't shake. Roman had made it clear from the start that he wasn't looking for anything casual, that what he felt for her wasn't something fleeting. He wasn't playing games. He wanted something real. And she couldn't deny that she felt the same way. But it wasn't just about the attraction. It was about the life they could build together. Roman's world was different from hers. He had more wealth, more power, more everything, but as they continued to spend time together, she realized that their differences didn't have to tear them apart. In fact, she found herself more and more fascinated by the way he saw the world, by the quiet ways in which he opened up to her. But as much as she wanted to believe in it, she couldn't quite let go of the fear that had always held her back. The fear of losing herself in someone else. The fear that no matter how much they connected, no matter how much they cared, their worlds would eventually collide in a way that would break them both. Roman, for his part, was patient. He had never once pressured her to take the next step. He knew she needed time, and he was willing to give it to her. But even with all the time they had spent together, he had never once asked her to be a part of his world completely. He never expected her to leave her life behind. He just wanted her to be in his life, with him, as his partner. The problem was that Serafina wasn't sure she could make that leap. She loved her shop, her routine, the life she had built from the ground up. She wasn't sure how to reconcile that with the life Roman led, one full of meetings and events, a world that felt both glamorous and overwhelming. She liked her quiet mornings, her solitary moments of peace. Could she really fit into a life that was anything but quiet? One evening, a few weeks after they had agreed to take things slowly, Roman asked her to meet him for dinner. This time, he had chosen a new restaurant, a place that was a little more high-end than their usual spots. Serafina dressed carefully, her heart fluttering with excitement but also anxiety. She had grown to look forward to their time together, but tonight, the thought of their dinner left her feeling uneasy. There was something in the air, something unspoken, that made her feel like tonight would be different. When she arrived at the restaurant, Roman was already there, seated at a table near the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. His sharp features softened when he saw her, his expression immediately warm, and for a moment, all the tension inside Serafina seemed to melt away. "Serafina," he said, standing up as she approached. "You look incredible, as always." She smiled, trying to hide the nervousness she felt. "Thank you. You look good too." They settled into their seats, the menu opened before them, but neither of them seemed to focus on the food. Instead, they spoke casually, talking about their days, their thoughts, the little things that made up their lives. And yet, the weight of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. There was something in the air, a quiet intensity that neither of them was ready to acknowledge outright. The waiter arrived with their drinks, and as the evening wore on, the conversation drifted toward a more personal place. Roman was quieter tonight, his usual confident demeanor tempered with something deeper, something that made Serafina's heart race. She felt like she was on the edge of something important, something that could change everything. "Serafina," he said finally, his voice serious, "I know I've asked you to take things slow. I respect that. But I can't help how I feel. I want to be with you. Not just casually, not just for now, I want something real with you." Serafina's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The moment she had been both waiting for and dreading. He had already said he wasn't in this for a fling, but hearing him say it again, in such a direct, unambiguous way, made her heart pound. "I care about you, Roman," she said quietly, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "But this is all so new for me. I don't know what it means. I don't know if I'm ready to step into a world like yours, to change everything about my life." Roman reached across the table, his hand gently resting on hers. The contact, though small, sent a jolt of warmth through her. "I don't want you to change who you are, Serafina. I love that you're strong, independent, that you've built something for yourself. I don't want you to lose that. I just want you with me, in this life, by my side." The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes, was undeniable. She had heard him say things like this before, but tonight, it felt different. It felt like he was offering her not just his heart, but his life. And as she sat there, staring at him, all the fears she had built up in her mind started to dissipate. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. "I'm scared, Roman," Serafina whispered. "Scared that I'll lose myself, that I won't be enough for this life, for you." Roman squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing against her skin in a way that made her heart race. "You're more than enough. And I'll never ask you to be anyone but yourself. We'll figure this out together, step by step. I just need you to trust me." She took a deep breath, letting the calm in his voice wash over her. She realized, in that moment, that the biggest obstacle wasn't her fears, wasn't the differences between their worlds, it was her own hesitation. She had spent so long keeping herself safe, keeping herself apart from the kind of love that Roman was offering. But maybe it was time to let go. Maybe it was time to trust. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "Okay, Roman. I trust you. I want to try this. With you." Roman's eyes lit up with something deeper than just desire. It was something that felt more enduring, something that made Serafina believe in the possibility of a future with him. He stood up, his hand still holding hers as he gently pulled her up from her chair. Without a word, he led her outside, into the cool night air. The city was alive around them, the buzz of activity filling the streets, but it felt like they were in their own world. Roman turned to her, his expression full of tenderness. "I've wanted this from the beginning, Serafina. I just needed to be sure that you were ready too. I don't want to rush anything. I just want us to go at our own pace." She smiled up at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, the weight of her doubt seemed lighter, more manageable. Maybe there were no guarantees, but there was one thing she knew for sure: Roman was real, and what they had was real. "I'm ready," she said, her voice filled with certainty. "I don't know where this will go, but I want to find out with you." Roman's face softened, and without another word, he leaned in to kiss her. The kiss was slow at first, a gentle promise of what was to come. But it deepened, filled with the kind of intensity that made everything around them seem unimportant. In that kiss, Serafina felt all her walls crumble. She was letting go. She was opening herself up to him, to their future together. When they finally pulled apart, Roman's smile was full of relief. "This is just the beginning, Serafina," he whispered. "And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in what felt like forever, Serafina believed him. She was ready to take the next step, whatever it was, with him. And together, they would face whatever came next. The days that followed their momentous conversation felt like a quiet storm, a shift that neither Serafina nor Roman had fully anticipated. There was a new energy between them, something different from the easygoing connection they had shared in the beginning. Now, it was more than just the chemistry between them. It was a bond, deeper, more grounded. Serafina could feel it, this unspoken understanding that they were building something real. But even though she had made the decision to trust him, to trust them, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the future hanging over her. It wasn't just Roman's world that overwhelmed her. It was her own. She had spent so long building her boutique, carving out a space for herself in a world that had never been easy. She had made sacrifices, worked tirelessly, and had created a life that felt stable, if not always exciting. Now, as she stood on the precipice of something that felt like a new chapter, something that felt more exciting than anything she had ever known, she was terrified. What if she lost herself in this new life? What if she was making a mistake by diving into something so unfamiliar? But whenever she was with Roman, all those fears seemed to fade into the background. In his presence, she felt seen, heard, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone was offering her a future, one that didn't just include their shared moments but also a future that could be built on trust and love. His patience had been everything. He never pushed her for anything she wasn't ready for, but he also made it clear, in subtle and not so subtle ways, that he was in this for the long haul. It was a Saturday morning when Roman called her, his voice warm and filled with an easy confidence. "Serafina," he said, his tone playful, "I have a surprise for you. I'd like to take you somewhere today. Can you be ready in 2 hours?" She smiled, the excitement in his voice unmistakable. It wasn't often that he surprised her with anything that wasn't pre-planned or business-related. "A surprise? You're making me curious." "Good," he replied. "You should be. Just be ready." 2 hours later, Serafina found herself in a black car, heading downtown, unsure of where she was going. Roman had kept the details to himself, only saying that it would be an experience she wouldn't forget. The journey through the city felt different this time. The usual bustle of traffic, the honking of horns, the hurried pace of pedestrians, it all seemed distant, almost like they were in their own bubble. And as the car stopped in front of a tall building, Serafina's curiosity grew even more. The driver opened the door for her, and Roman stood waiting outside, his expression calm but with a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. He took her hand as she stepped out of the car, and for the first time, Serafina noticed the building in front of them. It was beautiful, sleek and modern, with large glass windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. It wasn't a building she had ever noticed before, but something about it felt different from everything else she had seen in the city. "This is where we're going?" she asked, looking at him with a mix of curiosity and confusion. Roman smiled and nodded. "Yes. Come on, I think you'll like it." They walked inside, and the moment they entered, Serafina's breath caught in her throat. The interior was breathtaking. The space was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, and the entire place was bathed in natural light. The decor was minimalist but elegant, every detail carefully thought out. But what really took her by surprise was the large art installation in the center of the room, a piece that seemed almost otherworldly in its complexity. Roman led her further inside, and she noticed the sleek reception desk where a woman was seated, smiling warmly as they approached. "Mr. Hawk, it's good to see you," she said with a professional smile. "Everything is ready." "Thank you," Roman replied. He turned to Serafina, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and anticipation. "This is it. I wanted to share something with you, something that's been a part of my life for a long time." Serafina looked at him, puzzled. "What is it, Roman? What is this place?" "This is my personal gallery," he said quietly. "It's a collection of art I've accumulated over the years. Some of it is from well-known artists, but most of it is from emerging talent. I've been working on this for a while, curating pieces that speak to me, pieces that make me feel something deeper. It's not something I show to just anyone, but I want you to see it. I want you to understand a side of me that I don't usually share." Serafina's heart swelled as she took in the significance of his words. Roman was letting her into a part of his world that he had kept hidden. Art, for him, wasn't just about wealth, it was about meaning, about emotion. And to share that with her, to invite her into this intimate part of his life, meant more than she could put into words. They spent the next few hours walking through the gallery, Roman explaining the pieces, sharing stories about where they had come from, and what drew him to each one. The way he spoke about the art was passionate, his words filled with reverence and admiration. It wasn't just about owning expensive things, it was about the feeling he got from each piece, the way it moved him. Serafina was captivated, not just by the art, but by the way Roman's eyes lit up when he talked about it. It was the most vulnerable she had ever seen him, and it made her realize just how much he had opened up to her, how much he trusted her. As they stood in front of a particularly striking painting, a large, abstract piece that seemed to change depending on the angle, Roman turned to her. "There's something about this one that always draws me in," he said quietly. "It's like it speaks to something inside of me that I didn't even know was there. I feel a connection to it that I can't explain." Serafina studied the painting, letting the colors and shapes pull her in. She didn't fully understand the piece, but she understood what Roman meant. There was something raw and honest about it. Something that couldn't be easily put into words. "I think I understand," she said softly, turning to face him. "It's like it touches something deep inside. Something that words can't capture." Roman nodded, his eyes locked onto hers. "Exactly. And that's how I feel about us, Serafina. This connection we have. It's not something I can explain. It's not something I ever expected. But here we are, together, and I feel like it's something worth exploring, something worth building." The words hung in the air between them, and Serafina felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had been holding back. She had been so afraid, so unsure of herself, so uncertain about what the future would look like. But with Roman, standing there in the gallery, it felt different. She felt different. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what was coming. She was willing to take a chance, to trust in this, to trust in him. "I want this too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want to build something with you, Roman. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm ready to find out." Roman's expression softened, and he took a step closer to her. "We'll figure it out together, Serafina. I promise." And in that moment, standing in the middle of his gallery, surrounded by pieces of art that spoke to their shared vulnerability and connection, Serafina realized that she wasn't just walking into Roman's world, she was stepping into a future they would create together. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. With Roman by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. He leaned in and kissed her then, a kiss that was soft but full of promise, a promise that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, hand in hand. And as their lips met, Serafina knew, deep in her heart, that she was ready to embrace the life that awaited her.